We're talking about Maryland football for the first time ever on the JT Sports Podcast. Now, I don't know if there are a lot of Maryland fans out there, but if there are, and you're watching this, can I get a Go Terps in the comment section? Because the only Maryland fan that I know is my guy MCD Sports 4. Shout out to him if he's watching this. But I just need a Go Terps in the comment section. Let the people know, hey man, there's Maryland Terps fans out there that exist. Now, every single season, I have a adopted college football team that I root for behind my Miami Hurricanes. And the reason for this is because the Hurricanes let me down every single year. And by the time we get to week 5 or week 6, I've already lost all hope on the season. So I root for another college football team. And normally this team is a under the radar team that a lot of people don't have high expectations for. Last year was Arkansas, and 2020 was Indiana, and 2019 it was the Minnesota Gophers. And this season, that team for me is going to be the Maryland Terps, because I think that Maryland is being incredibly disrespected, and I think they're one of the most underrated teams in college football heading into this season. Check me out. Do you know what their over-under win total is going into this season? 5.5. This is a program that is coming off one of their most successful seasons in recent memory. They went 7-6. Mike Locksley has a fresh new contract extension, and he said that Maryland football hasn't even reached the peak for what they could become. And I'm really excited for what the Terps could do this season because they have a really good offense. You have Taulia Tagovailoa coming back for another season at quarterback. He was pretty good last year. Even though I would have loved to see him perform a little bit better against some of the better competition in the Big Ten, like Iowa, Ohio State, and Michigan State. But for the most part, he was pretty good. Now, Maryland has a really phenomenal group of wide receivers. We talk about how stacked Ohio State is at wide receiver and how they have the best receiving core not only in the Big Ten but in all of college football. But Maryland's receivers, they're up there. You have Jacob Copeland, who is a transfer from the University of Florida. He recently won MVP for Maryland in their past spring game that they just had not too long ago. You have Rakeem Jarrett, Dante Dumas, Deshaun Jones. So not only do you have great starting talent, but you also have great depth. So if God forbid one of these guys go down with an injury, you have guys on the bench who can come right in and step up and perform at a really high level. Now, we don't know who's going to end up starting at running back. They probably won't even have a RB1 this year. They're probably just going to go by committee. But they do love the talent that they have there and the depth that they have at the position as well. The offensive line returns all 5 starters from last season. And this wasn't a bad offensive line. This was a really good unit. This was one of the best pass blocking offensive lines in the Big Ten last year. And this team is going to be doing a lot of passing this season. Even though Mike Locksley did say that they want to be a lot better on the ground, but let's face it, with how much talent they have at wide receiver and who they have at quarterback, if Maryland is going to shock the Big Ten this year, they're going to do it behind the arm of Taulia. Now, some things that I would love for Maryland to improve on offense this season, they had to be better in the red zone. They had one of the worst red zone offenses in college football last season. They were ranked 118th in red zone scoring. And we're not talking about field goals. We're talking about touchdowns. And if you're trying to beat teams like Ohio State or some of the better teams in college football, you have to be able to, when you get inside the 20, to come away with touchdowns. You can't be settling for 3 points or coming away empty-handed, because that could be the difference between you losing a one-possession football game and being on the opposite end of that and winning those games. So for Maryland, the red zone offense has to step up. We're going to talk about the defense in a little bit. I ain't forget. Now, the third down offense also wasn't good. And it's really funny how good this offense was last year, despite the fact that they weren't good on third down and they weren't good at scoring inside the red zone. Normally, when you see an offense this high powered, they're normally really efficient in both of those statistics. However, they were 91st in third down efficiency last year, 36%. That's a big no-no. If Maryland is going to be as good as what a lot of Maryland fans think, what myself included think, they're going to have to improve that third down efficiency. Because you have to be able to keep drives alive on offense. You have to be able to keep the chains moving. And I do think that that is going to improve, because I think that this offense has way too much talent for it not to improve. Now, overall, I think that this is going to be a top 15, top 20 offense in America. And we already know, if you are a diehard Terps fan, that most of your games are probably going to be high scoring, probably going to be in the high 40s, maybe get into the 50s, because your defense last year wasn't all that great. And it doesn't really look as if things are going to be getting all that better. Now, the positive is that, I don't think the defense can get any worse from what it was last season, but their pass defense was atrocious. And really, it starts with, can you generate pressure up front? Now, their defensive line has two guys that I think can have really good seasons. You have Kite, who had 4 sacks last year. Greg Rose had 5 sacks. You're definitely going to be looking for those guys to step up when it comes to the defensive line. At linebacker, probably the biggest concern that the Maryland coaching staff has. They lost several players to the transfer portal. You do have Ruben Hippolyte II, who was third on the team in tackles with 62. He's going to be probably their best linebacker that they have going into this season. You have true freshman Jayshawn Barham, who was a 4-star recruit coming out of the 2022 recruiting cycle. He was the 10th best linebacker in the nation. He was an early enrollee. He had a very good spring. He spent time on the first team defense during the spring game, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that we're going to see a lot of him this season. Ahmad Mccullough was MVP on defense for the spring game as well. So when you look at Ahmad Mccullough, they're going to be expecting a lot from this linebacker group. Because anytime you're trying to have a good run defense, most of the time, you're looking at your D-line and you're looking at your linebackers. So how confident is this Maryland coaching staff and their front seven? They probably feel that they have some good pieces there, especially when you look at the D-line. When it comes to linebacker, you may have a good amount of confidence in your starters, but you probably don't have a lot of confidence in the depth that you have at that position. At cornerback, I definitely think that you have some pretty good pieces here. Jacorion Bennett, Deontay Banks, they're pretty good. At safety, you lost 2 starters to the NFL, and Jordan Mosley and Nick Cross. And we saw the inexperience of the secondary definitely be a huge talking point after the spring game. Mike Locksley actually spoke out against it and said that the position does have guys who have a lot of potential, but there's a good amount of inexperience there that concerns him. So when you look at Maryland going into this season and you analyze their schedule, your first 3 games are pretty much winnable. You play Buffalo, you go on the road to play Charlotte, then you have SMU. You should be able to go 3-0. Maybe you end up losing to SMU. I'm not betting on it, but that could potentially be a losable game for Maryland because SMU is a team that also has a lot of firepower on offense going into year 1 under Rhett Lashlee. But I think that most likely Michigan is going to be a game that you walk into at 3-0. Now, you travel on the road to face the Wolverines, and the Wolverines are going to have a really good defense, and they're going to have a really good offense. So that's probably going to be a game that Maryland may struggle to compete in, but hopefully you can keep things close because there's no reason why this offense should get shut down by any defense, no matter how much talent is on the opposing side, because when you have a wide receiving core that's this stacked and a quarterback this good, you should be able to keep up with the majority of teams in college football, and you shouldn't really face too many shutouts, especially with the offensive line having so much experience and talent there. So I think that definitely is a game that could end up being a barn burner there. You have Michigan State. I like them to pull off the upset against Michigan State. I think that Michigan State definitely is going to take a step back. Then you face Purdue. You got to play Indiana, Northwestern. So you have a pretty, I'm not going to say easy stretch, but it is a pretty winnable stretch. And then you go into your bye week, and then you really face the meat and potatoes of your schedule, because you have 3 really tough games coming off your bye. You got to travel on the road to Wisconsin. They're going to be tough. Even if they don't have an offense, their defense is still going to be really good. Then you got to go on the road back-to-back weeks to face Penn State. You just got done facing Wisconsin on the road. This is in November. Now you got to go on the road and face Penn State. Then you have Ohio State and Rutgers to close out the season. So my record prediction for the Terps this year is going to be 8-4. I think that Maryland is going to be really solid this year. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. Yes, they aren't going to have a defense, but I mean, there are a lot of teams every single season that are still really good that don't have good defenses. Look at Michigan State, for example, last year. Their defense wasn't really all that great. I believe they had one of the worst pass defenses in all of college football last year, and yet they were still able to make it and win a New Year's Six bowl game last year. So that tells you everything that you need to know. So for Maryland, I feel as long as this offense can get better scoring inside of the red zone and be more efficient in third down situations, I don't feel there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to compete with the majority of teams on their schedule this season outside of maybe Ohio State and Michigan. That's about it. Those are probably the only 2 games that I don't think that Maryland has a really legit chance of being able to win. So 8-4 is my record prediction. Potentially 9 wins. I think 10 wins definitely would be pushing it. But I think that Maryland is one of the most underrated football teams going into the 2022 college football season. And I think that a lot of people are sleeping on the Terps, man. So if you're a Maryland fan, if you made it to this point of the segment, give me a Go Terps again down in the comment section down below, man. And give me your thoughts on how good you feel Maryland football will be in 2022.